7 shots fired, subject down.
That was the police shooting that led to the death of Stephon Clark in California back in 2018. And because of that shooting and other various shootings where unarmed individuals were shot and killed, the state of California has decided to pass some legislation that makes it a little clearer that cops shouldn't use deadly force unless it is necessary. Now, the original form of this legislation was a lot stronger, but it ended up getting watered down because of opposition from police. And I'm gonna give you the changes in just a minute, but Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has signed this into law. The measure would bar police from using lethal force unless it is necessary to defend against an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to officers or bystanders. The current standard lets officers kill if they have reasonable fear that they or others are in imminent danger, a threshold that makes it rare for officers to be charged following a shooting and rarer still for them to be convicted. So the language in this legislation makes it a little clearer that you should not use deadly force unless you are facing an imminent threat. However, the original version was stronger, and the watered down version, I think, leaves more to be desired. And I'm gonna get into those details in just a second, but Cenk, do you wanna jump in?
Yeah, so Jason Johnson wrote an editorial in the San Francisco Chronicle. Who is he? He's the president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. And the whole editorial is crying about, well, how can cops possibly do their job if they can't reasonably kill people? Well, it's a question as to whether it is reasonable or necessary. That's the conversation, right? He says, well, look, a reasonable here, I'll give you a quote. This means that any use of force by police, including deadly force, is evaluated based on whether a reasonable police officer in a similar situation would react in a similar way. He's referring to the old standard. And he thinks that's great. Well, first of all, that's a reasonable police officer. Why shouldn't it be a reasonable person? Well, because police historically have acted unreasonably. So if I saw Stephon Clark in his backyard, even if he was running away from me, and I wasn't sure he had a gun. Look, you never know what you might do in a situation, but I would be shocked if I shot and killed him.
Yeah, I mean, if he's running away from you, he is not posing an imminent threat, right?
And it's dark outside, it's night. So would I be worried that he has a weapon in a situation where it's tense, they got called in and he's running away? Of course I'd be worried. Would I shoot him without knowing whether he has a gun? No way. I know, look, a guy broke into my house, and I don't want to get back into that old story. But no, I didn't react by immediately murdering him because I don't know why he did. Likely he was on drugs in my case. In case of Stephon Clark, they're like, oh, that turned out that it was a phone. Well, we didn't bother checking, we just shot him because God, it might endanger me. And in this op-ed, Jason Johnson is constantly talking about, well, what if the cops were slightly in danger? And talking about it's life and death situations. But it's also a life and death situation for Stephon Clark. But what they ignore, all the cops that are on this side, they say, basically, implicitly what they're saying is, his life doesn't matter at all. We don't care that he's in a life and death situation. The only life that matters is the cops. So I'd rather have that guy be dead than the cop have a 1% chance of getting hurt. Well, I don't find that to be reasonable at all. And I find it perfectly reasonable for the new standard to be, you only kill someone if it's necessary. That's a controversy. But apparently for a lot of the cops, they're like, well, I mean, now it's gotta be necessary for me to kill someone? Before I was killing them left and right. Now it's gotta be necessary before I murder someone. Wow, you guys are too tough on us. No, we're way too soft on you.
So one of the things that stood out about Stephon Clark's death was not only how unjust it was, but also how they allowed him to just kind of lay there, bleed out. And then sometime after that, where it was pretty clear he was dead because they fired several rounds, they decided,
and he wasn't moving, and he didn't have a pulse.
Right, they handcuffed him.
Oh, just to be safe, just to be safe. How about him? Because they don't value his life at all.
Right.
And so you can say, oh, it's Cenk, it's not racial. They don't value any poor person's life in America. They don't value any middle class person's life in America. You think if they shot some rich guy in Beverly Hills, that they handcuff him and see what happens? No, they get to the hospital right away. They wouldn't have shot him at all. Okay, does it make you feel better if it's based on class rather than race? But historically, has it been based on race? Goddamn right it has. Over and over and over again. You think every black guy in the country is lying. They all made it up. And you see on video them being shot when they're unarmed over and over again. But somehow we got idiot right-wingers in this country like, no. I think it's more reasonable that the guys who did the shooting are right rather than every African American in the country. Well, oh, gee, I wonder why you say that.
So let's talk a little bit about how the original bill was watered down. Again, it was watered down because the police union and police departments in California were very much against the original version. They felt that it was a little too specific, too narrow in regard to when officers can use lethal force. A revised version of the bill filed Thursday drops an explicit definition of necessary that was in the original. The deleted language said officers could open fire when there is no reasonable alternative. Okay, so that is a way of kind of weakening it. So it's easier to make an argument that the lethal force was necessary. The amended measure also makes clear that officers are not required to retreat or back down in the face of a suspect's resistance, and officers don't lose their right to self-defense if they use objectively reasonable force. So let's stop right there. This part is incredibly important because remember, in this case, the cops could have retreated as they followed him in the backyard, right? As he was running away from them, they could have retreated because he's not an imminent threat. There's really no reason to use lethal force. But under the current version of this now law, they don't have to retreat. In fact, they have the right to pursue him and use lethal force if they deem it necessary.
I don't like that language puts reasonable back as a standard. No, it should be necessary. And so, look, could it be necessary if you think the guy is armed to chase him? Of course it could be necessary. Do we want the cops to do their jobs? Yes, we're dying, literally dying for the cops to do their actual jobs, which is to protect the citizens. But in this case, they weren't sure that it was a gun at all. And it turned out it wasn't, it was a phone. And so the right wing will use that as a defense. Wait, no, it's not a defense of killing someone to say, I wasn't sure it was a gun, so I killed him just in case? Just in case? So that brings me back to the Jason Johnson editorial. He also used to be a deputy commissioner in Baltimore and shows you a guy like this was in charge and how dangerous it was for the citizens, especially in Baltimore. Well, luckily he's not there anymore. He said, one seemingly small change in wording now leaves officers wide open to 2020 hindsight. Hey, let me ask you guys something. You're all have different jobs. Are you all in danger of being judged with 2020 in hindsight? Of course you are. Every manager. What's that?
Every day.
Every day, because every manager then afterwards does an evaluation and says, did you do the right thing? Did you do the wrong thing? Did you spend too much? Did you spend too little? Did you do this? Did you do that? On any job, you know it, you get evaluated at your jobs. Here, this is evaluated after you killed someone. You took their lives. And the cops complain, oh, now I gotta be judged after every time I kill someone. Now you're gonna evaluate me in hindsight. Yes, that's what everyone is subject to. No, they want to be above, they don't want to enforce the law. They want to be above the law.
Can I give you one other way the legislation was watered down? Because this is also important. Amendments also strip out a specific requirement that officers try to de-escalate confrontations before using deadly force, but allow the courts to consider officers' actions leading up to the fatal shootings.
So this one's actually even more important because there are perfectly normal scenarios where you chase after the guy, but you should take care to de-escalate a situation. So I'll give you a great example. Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old African-American boy who was shot and killed in Cleveland. So cops pulled right up to him and shot him in 2 seconds. Now another way that they could have done that was not to pull right up to him. They literally climbed the curb, went on the grass, took out their cops and shot him, took out their guns and shot him instantly, right? What they could have done is pull up to the curb. Get out, even have your weapons out, because they got a report that somebody had a gun. It was actually a 12-year-old boy with a toy gun, right? Maybe it's a toy gun. Maybe it's not a gun at all. Maybe the report was wrong. Pull up to the curb, and if you want, be extra safe, take out your own weapons and say, hey, put that down. No, that would be de-escalation. They don't have to de-escalate. They could just pull right up to Tamir Rice and shoot him dead. No, that is a terrible standard. Terrible. Whether it's a black kid or not, whether it's a kid or not, whether just any of us, give us a chance. Give us another unarmed black man shot in a Walmart in Ohio. They shot him in 2 seconds as well. He was carrying a toy gun from that Walmart because he was shopping. But they didn't bother to ask the question. They shoot first and later say, oh, now you're gonna judge me in hindsight. Oh, wow, okay. Yes, that's the whole point of setting these standards so that you don't immediately murder the citizens.
You know who gets judged a lot in hindsight? The victims of these shootings.
Exactly. Oh, did he have marijuana in his system? If you're a reporter and you write about how they had marijuana in their system, you're an embarrassment.
100%.
Marijuana stays in your system for 40 days. Are you gonna write every time if alcohol stayed in their system 40 days? Oh, but 13 days ago he had a beer, so he must be guilty. It's a good thing he was shot by the cops. That is the implication of your terrible articles. All right, last thing. Back to Johnson, because I'm not done with him. He says they will very rationally, about the cops, they will very rationally act to protect their lives and careers simply by avoiding dangerous encounters. Okay, then they should become plumbers or accountants or dentists, because then they would avoid all dangerous situations. But the whole point of a cop is to be in dangerous situations. If you don't want that job, shut up and retire. Go get another job. So if your way of avoiding the danger is shooting any citizen without asking any questions within 2 seconds, and then go, well, any reasonable cop, we've all been taught, any reasonable cop would immediately murder the citizen, well then you shouldn't have that job and you should stop crying about it. So thank God California did this, and they should have stuck with the original language. Well, hey, you made it this far. You must really like the Young Turks. Thank you, we really appreciate you. Now, another easy way to keep supporting us also helps keep your internet activities and data private, all with a push of the NordVPN app. Head to nordvpn.com/TYT right now for 75% off of your next 3 years.